I want to show the other two mind-blowing developments which I didn't show last time in last video. I recommend you watch that one first because it shows 2 times more current going from the grounds of my transformers to ground, 2 times more amperage flowing through there than the supply was putting out. Okay, so here's the other developments which are mind-blowing in my opinion. First of all, I have the electromagnet, the transformer primary grounds, going to ground through this yellow wire. You see my output voltage with the scope. Okay, my output voltage is 3.34 volts. It might be fuzzy, you might not be able to see it. Anyway, now input amperage is 1 amp. Now I'm gonna unhook the ground to the driver. Now these drivers are powering the electromagnets with a negative and a positive, right? I could unhook this ground totally. This ground is now unhooked. So this driver, these drivers, which are powering my transformers, are powered with just the hot wire. The negative from the transformers is going back to the supply ground, but the supply ground is not hooked up to the driver circuit. And the circuit still works with 3.82 volts output. Remember, it was about 1 amp. Now 0.2 amps. Okay, so that's number one, that the input driver, it doesn't need a ground because it's getting its ground from the recycling of the energy from the rotating electric. It's sending the ground into the other one, which grounds both of them because they're tied together. But there's no ground going back to the supply. And they're both still working. You could see the lights blinking and it making the frequency. So that's revelation number one. And second of all, when I take a voltage reading from this input, I'm going to put hot here and I'm going to put negative here. Now the supply set at 14.2 volts. I have 25 volts. These drivers are being powered with 25 volts. Even though I'm putting in 14, there's 25 volts on negative and positive. And I know they're actually being powered with 25 volts because under regular circumstances, I have these cranked all the way up. And this goes up to 24 volts. So this starts clipping in a square formation at this voltage reading. It only gets smooth at 24 volts. So this thing is receiving 25 volts in when I'm only putting 14 volts into it. So those are the other revelations which I didn't show in the prior video. So it works with grounding the drivers, 343, 1 amp. I'm slipping, hold on, there we go. 1 amp, 335 on the output, and no ground on the drivers, 382, and that gives me 25 volts. Now if I put the ground on and measure voltage, I get 14. If I take the ground off, I get 25. Now it should start to make sense why I'm seeing close to 2 times the current coming out of the grounds going into ground of the supply than I have coming out of the supply.